Today, we're joined with Courtney Rickard, Senior Manager of College Success at Honest Game. Courtney is a graduate of Seton Hall with 21 plus years in higher ed experience. She's a proud wife and mom of three, running around all the time, and has vast experience in this space that brings us here today. Welcome, Courtney.
Thank you, David, for having me. Super excited to be on the podcast today.
That's great. Thanks for joining. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you got to Honest Game.
So it's a long background of starts and stops and flow, but I'm really excited to share my experience because I don't really think that my 22-year-old self graduating from college would have ever thought that this is where I would have ended up. So my path really started. I was pre-med in college. My mom is a doctor. All growing up, I wanted to be my mom, and so I went to Seton Hall from a little town in Wisconsin. So that was a big jump. That was one of my first big leaps, was going halfway across the country to college. And I didn't know anybody. I didn't know a soul when I got to Seton Hall. And I wanted to be pre-med. I wanted to follow in my mom's footsteps. And I really didn't think of anything else. I didn't think that there was another path for me. I was, dead set on becoming a doctor. And so I majored in biology and really was excited to start that journey. But kind of along the side of this path, I got a campus job. And that's something that I really feel strongly about because I had a great mentor in that. The boss, the head of the Seton Hall Academic Support Services for Athletes at the time, Robin Cunningham, is the first female to get a full scholarship to play basketball at Seton Hall. Her number is retired in the gym. If you ever go
Wow, that's great.
She's amazing. Here's her picture is on my desk every day. I look at her. We talk often, and I didn't realize at the time how instrumental she would be in my journey. And she still is to this day. I was really just in the athletic department because they were going to pay me $6 an hour to tutor the student athletes. And I was like, this is great. It was my first real job. And so I would go to biology lab. I would go to AP, I would go to chemistry. I'd be in physics, but I would swing over to the athletic department and easily make $6 an hour tutoring the student athletes. And that part was really rewarding because it was definitely out of my comfort zone, but I think it's really where I first saw that I like to teach. I like to see growth and through relationships, really to watch someone not know a concept, teach them and watch them really understand it and be able to apply it. And so really my freshman year in college, I was pre-med, but I was a tutor in the athletic department. And I watched around me the next couple of years, the office, when I would walk in, it had great energy. The staff there was so in sync and really very, very much passion driven, right? They came to work every day, knowing the impact they could make on their students that came into the office. And I had this kind of aha moment in college where I went on a mission trip to Trinidad. And so half of the mission trip was at a HIV/AIDS home for children. It was an orphanage. And there, it was just a large house. And there was probably about—
Oh, wow. Just a large house in the middle of Trinidad?
In the middle of Trinidad. And they had about 10 to 15 children there whose parents had died of AIDS, and they were also HIV positive. And so my goal really in this mission trip to Trinidad was to get experience in healthcare. Okay. And Seton Hall is very big into anything that you want to do in terms of mission, they really provided. And so, there's about 10 of us that went there. But that was only half of the trip. The other half was going into other orphanages and tutoring students in the national exam. So in Trinidad at the time, this was back in the 90s, but they test every 11-year-old. Okay. And based on your exam, you get put on a path. And if you do well, you get to go to school as a 12-year-old. If you don't, then they kind of put you into these trade schools, and maybe you're going to be a painter or a gardener.
So that's really different than how the US does it.
Yes.
Where they segment at 12 years old, they look at your intellect to try to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. And that was really interesting to me because I kept thinking, what if it was just a bad day? I was a bad test taker. My SATs were not great. And I just kept thinking about these children, and we were at an orphanage, and I'm thinking, the adults in their life have kind of written them off because they didn't do well in the exam.
Right.
And yet maybe they're going to really love being a painter. Maybe they're going to love being a gardener. And so we were there tutoring math and science and reading. But in the time, I kind of looked and said, wow, they have other talents. And no one's told them, you're a really good painter. How do you know about all these flowers? And like, I didn't know which ones are growing annually or, in Abraham was it. I remember it to this day. One of the little boys his name was Abraham, and no one had ever kind of complimented him about his other talents that were not from textbooks.
Right.
And I said, you know what? It was a Thursday night. I'm at the top of a mountain in Trinidad. Like, no joke. This is not even fake. This is true life. I was journaling in the top of a mountain in Trinidad, and I said, what am I doing? I don't want to go to medical school. I want to be my mom. So if my mom was a garbage collector, I probably would have went on to be that, because I wanted to be my mom. And I thought about her impact as a physician was on her medical students. She loved teaching medical students.
Right.
And I said, what am I doing? I don't want to go to medical school. I want to be Robin. I want to help student athletes to use their passion for sports and help them in school. And I landed in Newark on a Friday, and I went right to Robin's office, and I said, I'm not going to medical school. Because I already applied to medical school. I took the MCAT.
Right. And you've been at Seton Hall, going to pre-med and everything.
I was literally signed. I was the president of the Pre-Med Honor Society. I was ready to roll. And I walked into Robin's office and I said, I'm not going. I want to be you when I grow up. I want to run an academic support program for student athletes at some college. I want to be you. What do I do? And we cried together. And I remember that day. It was in her office, and she's like, well, then stay after graduation, stay and be our graduate assistant. I'll teach you everything about this world and this profession. And she really took me under her wing, and I got to see everything. I got to learn about the hard stuff and the easy stuff and she really exposed me to what that was. And I was lucky enough to get a full-time job after graduate school. One of the advisors had taken another job, and Robin said, would you like to be a full-time academic advisor in our athletic department? And it was April 4th. I remember the day. I was like, oh my God, yes. And that really started my my full-time career in athletics administration.
So you talked about Robin as your mentor. How much has that influenced your life as having a mentor who you can really count on and collaborate with and even bounce ideas off of?
To this day, when I left Stony Brook to come to Honest Game, I left 18 years at Stony Brook. I left 20 years in higher education, and to join a startup company in the private sector. She was the first person I called.
Okay.
I think having a mentor is really crucial in your development, especially if you might be lacking the confidence in yourself to actually do it. And every step along the way, I think, looking back, I relied on Robin for every moment. The time when I left Seton Hall after 3 years to go to Stony Brook, I had never even been to Long Island. I had no clue about the campus. She said, you have to apply for that job. Like you should do it. Then I get the job. She met me. I had to take the train from New Jersey to Long Island on the interview day. And at 5:45 in the morning, she's there in her pajamas wishing me good luck at the train. I remember this. She and my coworker, Matt, were there to wave goodbye. Every step along the way. When I became the director, I came to Stony Brook as an academic advisor, but I was named the director about 9 months into being here.
Right.
She was the first person I called. I got named the assistant athletic director. She was the first person I called. And I think every promotion I got, or every step of the way, it's important to have mentors to be able to call and sharing the excitement, but also some of the disappointments too, or even, like you said, just to throw things off of.
Yeah, well, it sounds like she's really been a major influence on your life. And I think as we think about people getting into their careers, they need to think about mentors as an important aspect, because they are definitely somebody to help guide you. I know in my experience, I had a mentor early on that pushed me to go and apply for the position I'm in now. And if he didn't push, I would have just been like, yeah, it's okay.
I probably would still be at Stony Brook, to be very honest with you,
Okay.
if I didn't have her voice and her support.
Now, what do you do now at Honest Game?
Yep. So so Honest Game is a company based in Chicago. We are really trying to elevate the playing field and allow for equity and access for high school students to go to college by way of sports. So we calculate the academic eligibility to play at the Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA, or junior college levels for college sports. So we work with high school students, take a look at their transcript, their SAT scores, and we will not only say, right now, are you eligible or not to go and play college sports according to your academics? But if not, what's your plan? Let's build a plan together. You know, you're ineligible because you're short a math class. So let's make sure you take an extra math class this summer. And utilizing these short-term goals that we know high school students really rely on to be able to play college sports and kind of meet those goals along the way. So I oversee our academics and compliance part of the company. So
Right.
I'm in charge of making sure that all those academic reports that go out to the 77,000 users that we have are accurate, and working a lot with our customers in terms of a little bit more one-on-one attention too, about where they want to play, how to get there if they're short. There's a lot of players in the game, right? We always say at Honest Game, we're not a recruiting service.
Right.
We give data, very unbiased, unemotional data. This is your high school transcript. This is your NCAA GPA. Can you go to play college sports or not? We really take your athletic ability out of it, because at the end of the day, academics is the thing that opens the doors. If you're a great athlete, but you don't have the NCAA academic requirements, you don't get to play.
That's true.
So we, that's one thing that I love about our company is we're not, predatory in that recruiting space. We give very factual data. And, there's a lot of people out there that say, oh, your son should get a Division I scholarship to go and play basketball, when there's a lot of high school students who want to go play college basketball. But if they're not eligible, it doesn't matter. Right.
Now, you said you like to educate and you got into sports. Why'd you decide to go to the sports route, not to become like a K-12 teacher or something else?
That's a good point. My master's is actually in secondary education for science and math.
Okay.
In order to become a graduate assistant at Seton Hall, I had to pick a graduate program. And I said, what might I like if this doesn't work out, if this whole academic advising and college athletics doesn't work out? And I thought I could teach high school biology. I could teach high school math. And then I was in class and I had to do practicums, and I said, oh my God, no, I can't. I remember being in the class and thinking, like, I'm in charge of these 30 kids to make sure that they know this, this biology. I was really very much into like the human biology piece. Right. I always said, like, I never liked rocks or the earth. And I was thinking, if I'm going to teach high school science, I have to know all of those things and be passionate enough about them to get students to really care about rocks in the earth. And I'm like, that is not going to be me. That is not me. Ironically, in my master's, after I got done with my master's, I was actually a site supervisor for some of our graduate students who were in the education program. One of the faculty said, listen, I'd love for you to kind of oversee our science master's student, our undergrad students. And so I remember taking, a drive out, and I watched 5 or 6 secondary ed undergrads in their practicum. And it just reaffirmed, like, this is not for me. and yeah, I have 3 kids now, and I am blessed in our school system. Our school district is amazing. The teachers are amazing. but you have to be. If you want to really get kids excited about school, it can't be a robot. And I definitely would have been a robot about
Yeah, well, that's definitely not good. You have to have the passion for it. And I understand exactly what you're talking about. I'm into getting people to grow and their understanding of it. Sometimes when you just have to get the subject material so they can take the standardized test, that's not really where some of us are. We're trying to do even more with their personal growth. So I think that's where you're focused. Now, the pandemic has uprooted a lot of people's lives and everything else. How do you think now, I know you're working completely remote, how that has changed your outlook on life and work-life balance and everything else?
Yeah, no, I think someone actually asked me this weekend, do you like working from home? And you know, we were forced home, right? When the pandemic first hit, we were all forced home, with no training as to how to be a quality remote worker. Quite honestly, it's just not something that in a athletic department you do, right? You go to work on Christmas Eve. You might have to go to work on, the day when there's no classes, there's still practice and games and study hall. And so I was always at work. And when COVID forced us home, I realized I would have been really good, except at the same time, COVID forced 3 children home in our house. At the same time, COVID shut down college sports, and my husband, who is a college coach, was forced home with no ability to use his passion. Like, there was no recruiting. There was no events to even watch. There was no coaching. There was all of his students were back home at their house, and that was hard. And so I think I dug deep to figure out how to do this, and I didn't do it well. I was not a great remote worker with 3 children running around. I was feeling guilty. My husband was trying to figure out what to do. He's teaching kindergarten and 2nd grade, and so it was rough. Once I left Stony Brook to come to Honest Game, where we are all remote, I really think that COVID or not, I think you need to have a supportive work group to be a quality remote worker. And that's one thing that I think COVID showed, that you can be really efficient at home if you have the situation to do so. You can get even more work done in a remote situation than potentially in an office. And I remember, like, I would drive to work and I think, okay, these are the 5 things I want to do today. And then other things would happen. You got caught in the hallway and you're in a 20-minute conversation. You're like, oh, shoot, where did the time go? Or even traveling. Like I said, that was what, if I have a meeting across campus in the admin building at 11:30 to 12, well, I got to walk across campus. So I wouldn't have an 11:30 and then at 12, you need travel time, right? Working remote, there is no travel time. You can have meetings back to back because you just click one button and then you click another. And so I think you a little bit more efficient when you're home in remote. But my company is extremely supportive of all of us being remote. We have a dedicated time in our week. We call them team ups, where you come together and we talk about one positive up professionally and one positive up personally. And it's an ability to say, you know what, we would have normally been talking about these things in the hallway or like hanging out in your doorway. Oh my God, guess what happened at 2nd grade pickup yesterday? And you may not have that banter. So we do that. I think also the working remote is you need some sort of message system that is easy peasy. So we use Microsoft Teams, but the chat function is really important. And I had to get used to that. Like, oh yeah, that would be like me getting up from my desk and walking down the hall and knocking on George's door. Hey, I got a question. Like that's the same thing as the chat. And so that, I think, COVID or not, you've got to have a supportive staff about how to work remotely. But I think for anyone listening who's new in the workplace, the work remote thing, I mean, David, that would have never been an option for us. Like, I'm just thinking 10 years ago, if someone said, would you like to be a senior women administrator, senior associate athletic director, remote? Like, what? There's no way. And now, I was talking with a recent alum, probably maybe like 3 years ago. She was only applying for remote jobs.
Oh,
And I thought, wow, okay, but yeah, she can. They're out there, and it makes sense for a company, right? Like for us, why would we pay to have the overhead? Why pay to have an office space? Why pay to so? And you can hire more people than just people in Chicago, right? So we're global. It makes sense. But that
I remember. Oh yeah, well, I remember my first job commuting 2 hours from Long Island to New York City every day, each way, back and forth. And I was like, that was the expected. You had to be in the office and whatever. I didn't have to deal with anybody. There were times where I didn't see anybody in all day because my job was developing some software, but still they wanted you in the physical office in Manhattan and whatever else. Well, now you're right. So many people think the remote, you can just do it remotely. You don't actually have to be there. And I think that's really changing the work field and the career field in ways we still are trying to embrace and figure out.
I agree.
Yeah. Now, do you feel ever like alone because you're working from home or anything else?
Yeah. Yes. Sometimes I do feel, even like, in the house, I'm thinking, am I talking to myself? There are days, sometimes I do have I call them data days, where it's just me and 2 screens and a lot of data, and I don't interact. I don't use my voice. I might chat and things, but I don't speak until my kids get off the bus, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the first time I'm using my voice. I do feel lonely at times, and not so much like I'm isolated in my house. I remember back to the really good relationships and the friends I had at Stony Brook.
Right.
And if I had a bad meeting, or if I was frustrated, or if I just needed, I could get up and walk down the hall and just knock on somebody's door, sit down and be like, oh my gosh, guess what just happened?
Right.
And that I don't have that ability to do that. I can do that I can call one of my coworkers. I can, quick chat them, but I think there's just something about going into somebody's office and just being like, oh, so I do have moments, but it's more of like nostalgia. It's remembering how that was. And I try to combat that. Honestly, I've made a very conscious effort to schedule social meetings or happy hours or any time that I might be working remote, and to just change my venue. So I try to find there's a coffee shop that's near campus. And if I'm ever there, I'll text some people that I used to work with. Hey, if you want to pop over real quick, I'll be working at this place during the day. And I try to make a concerted effort, as do they, to still have those social pieces.
Yeah, I think that's the most important. Anytime you are working remote, you still need to keep the social piece and the social aspects.
Yeah.
I know I work remote like 2 days a week, and I have a friend who him and I walk, and he either tries to get his work at home day the same day, or we meet somewhere between our jobs. And we've got a couple places where we meet. We just say, hey, walk, and we just pick a one word, and we both know where it is. And we work out our schedules just to get that interaction, which I think is important as you think about it. And I think as careers develop, we need to think about that as we go. What's a failure that you may have encountered in your work career that you really feel like embodied or changed you over time?
I think a failure for me, looking back, I was put in a leadership position very, very early in my career. And I admittedly was not ready. The previous staff that I was on at Seton Hall, we were a family.
Right.
I joke, our boss would bring peanut butter and jelly. She would literally like, I'm gonna make you a lunch when you're done tutoring. Come on in. Like we ate as a family. It was a very family environment. I don't ever remember her having to call any of us in and reprimand us for not doing a good job, for being late to work, for not giving 100%. So I never got to see that. I never got to watch when a supervisor has to call someone in and hold them accountable. And because that's just not the environment that we were in. We all stayed later than our boss. We all gave 150%. That's how we were raised in the business, to use that phrase. So when I was put in a leadership position, I didn't know how to build an environment where I would have people like that. And I also definitely didn't have the wherewithal about how to lead a group and hold them accountable. And I think looking back, some of my biggest failures in my profession was not doing enough to grow my leadership ability. I didn't read enough. I didn't ask questions. I didn't have hard conversations. I hated confrontation when I first started. And I just figured everybody must want to love this job and do it, all day, every day, like I did.
Right.
And so that, I think, looking back, I failed at being a leader for some of my staff. And that's been really hard to know. They have all gone on and done wonderful things, despite my inability to really grow them and lead them the way that they deserve to.
But look, Courtney, you and I have known each other for a long time. I don't see that completely as a failure. I feel that that's something you had to grow on. And I think you put your effort in and you were focused on how to help the students and your staff at the same point. And that was always a challenge when you're trying to do too many things at once. So I think, yes, you may have learned it early on that you would take on more responsibility and how that developed. But building a culture is a hard thing. And you have to not only spend time, you have to have the right people on your bus. And that's what I always found when I've moved into different leadership roles. And sometimes you have different people who have different philosophies on how to reach the goal. Sometimes they don't realize, well, you're trying to build a culture here and you have to get everybody on the same page. Look, confrontation's hard. Everybody doesn't like it, whatever else. But it's one of those things where if you don't address it, I always talk about the rumor mill and how the rumor mill then just is the leadership.
Yep.
Everybody manages by what's going on in rumors. And I spoke to somebody recently about how transparent that person is. She manages a staff of 160 people. And every week she writes a daily email, what's going on in the organization. And if somebody sends her an email, sometimes she'll quote it and send it back to them in the weekly email. And I was like, why did you decide to do that from a leadership standpoint? And her point was, because I've worked with bad leaders and I didn't want to be one. But she goes, I also learned I don't want to lead this organization of 160. I'm stepping down in like 2 weeks, Dave. I'm like, wow. So you learn things as you go.
Yeah.
So definitely I see that. What are some valuable skills people need to be successful in their career? We talk about soft skills and everything else. Are there any that you think that really stand out?
Yeah, I think it's funny that we use the term soft skills, because I feel like these are actually the skills where if you don't have them, everything becomes harder. So I don't know if that's semantics or not. But the ability to listen to people, truly listen, that's hard. And I think that's definitely a skill where you can practice it anytime, right? Listening to my 6-year-old, listening to you, listening to anything. It's truly listening and being able to validate that person's thoughts. That's what they're feeling. That's what they want to say. But then also kind of incorporating it into how you move about, whatever they had to say. So I really think listening is extremely key. Other soft skills, I tell this to student athletes all the time, like, you don't love everybody on your team. Like, there's no way that you love everybody on your team. And you may hate your coach, right? Those are transferable skills to the workplace. You're not going to love every one of your coworkers for whatever reason. Maybe you don't have anything in common with them, but you're on the same team. You're on the same team, and your leader, your boss, your coach, your CEO, that's your leader. And so at the end of the day, you kind of have to have these people skills, but this working as a team and communication is really important. We were in a meeting the other day and we weren't jiving. Our leadership team, there's 5 of us. We weren't jiving. And we're very honest. We have a very honest and open group. And I raised my hand and I said, here's the deal. I don't think this has to do with the topic that we were fighting about. It has nothing to do with the topic. This is a communication problem. Somebody was not in the initial meeting.
Right.
And now they're back in this meeting and they're wondering what just happened. Why didn't you include me? That's what I'm seeing. And again, don't not using you statements, but
Right.
I'm hearing from the discussion that this is a communication problem. And I think once we all kind of looked at it, like, yeah, you're right. This has nothing to do with the topic at hand. We solved the problem in our organization, and that problem got solved. It's how it got solved. That is the problem. So I think communication and being able to be open and honest to a point is really important.
Okay.
Other soft skills that I think are really important is, especially in the startup life for me, but I could have used it a lot more of this earlier in my career, is flexibility. Learning to fail is really important. And you learn probably more from a failure than you do from a success. So being able to be flexible and say, okay, I failed at that. How am I not going to do it again? Why did it happen in the first place? And let's move on. And I think a lot of my early career in my professional days was fear of failure. So I just wouldn't try. Okay. I would do it the same way that we had done it forever, because if I tried something new and it failed, I don't know what I would do with myself. So just keep, rinse and repeat. And that's not always best for the organization. It maybe, or me as someone, growing in that profession, failing is a good thing. And so I think a softer skill could be, what do you do when you pick yourself up?
That's true. That's a really good, yeah. Now, you talked about organization and how you keep yourself organized. Are there any tools or techniques you use each day to keep yourself organized, to keep track of what you want to accomplish this day, this week?
That's such a good question. I think, logistically, there's a lot of software out there that will help people do this. And I definitely would say find your way. I used to be a Post-it note person. Legit, okay. I used Post-it notes and a paper and a pencil, and I'd make little, but whatever works for you, right? Whatever works for you. We have a system in our organization where we bucket goal tasks based on time. So we have to-do items that are 7 days. That's it. You only get 7 days to do them. So every day I start my day with what's on my to-do list that I have 7 days to crack out. Then we also have larger ones that are 14 days. We have our quarterly goals that are 90 days. And obviously then we have your goals. Right. I try, usually not so much towards the end of the week. Thursdays, I don't really do this, but definitely Sunday through Wednesday nights, I try to focus on my next day to plan out what are the goals that I really want to get accomplished. And it takes time and diligence. As I said, rolling into that to Fridays, I'm sometimes like, oh, I just get to the weekend, but like, no, Friday isn't working. Like you can get stuff done. But I really try to start each day like that. What is necessary to get done in the next 7 days, in the next 14, but also keeping my eye on the pulse of those quarterly goals. So, I've got 90 days to do some pretty big projects. What am I doing today that will help in that larger chunk that was given? It's a lot easier, I think, to do in my role now because it's we're very function based. We always say right person, right seat. You want to have our PRS, the right person in the right seat. I am in the right seat for my skill set, for my knowledge, for my background. I am given tasks that our CEO knows these are Courtney tasks. Things come and go, right? And so you're going to get a softball thrown at you like, oh, shoot, no goal got done today, but I did 7 other things, so that's really important. But I think you can do that even if you're not in, startup life or a software company or who uses a system. We use it. It's a software called 90. But I think anybody can really stay focused. And I think when you look at it that way, like it was freeing to me. When you start to look at your goals and how you're going to accomplish them, I think so many times you think like, oh, next year, what are your goals for 21, 22 or the academic year? You're like, what are your goals? And then you write them down and you put them in a folder and you never see them again until like the meeting before the end of the year. And you're like, ah, shoot, what did I do? But if you truly see them visible every day, like, and we meet as a staff weekly and we have to say out loud.
Yeah.
What did you get done? Did you get your to-dos done? How are your goals? How are your 90-day goals? Are they on track or off track? You have to say it out loud to a team of your peers. That is huge. And so if you don't have that in your organization, I'm throwing out some suggestion here, but create it. There was a former coworker of mine. I so miss working with him. We'd keep each other on track. It was great. And we kind of had this, like, let's just keep each other accountable. And he would come in and be like, we said we do this at the last meeting and we have not worked on it. Let's get, and I'm like, yes, Jordan, yes. You got to find somebody like that. Find a person who can hold each other accountable within your organization. And then I think also having support. My best friend from kindergarten, we were talking last night on the phone. She's in Wisconsin. She does something completely not related to what I'm doing professionally. But we were saying like, okay, let's hold each other accountable. Going into the Memorial Day weekend, this upcoming weekend, let's do it. And so this morning I set my alarm early and she set her alarm early and we texted each other like, did you get up early? Like, yes, let's crush this Monday. So I think looking at your goals, writing them down, keeping them visible every single day. And sometimes, again, I've gone into meetings and said, I didn't get my to-do done today, or that goal is off track. I did not get to work on that last week, but you have to say it and then make a conscious effort to go back each day and try to do something about it.
That's great. Yeah, I find that every morning I write 3 goals of what I want to accomplish that day, and I look them towards my larger goals. But one thing that I always wondered, do other people put down like a personal goal, either down daily or weekly, that they want to try to accomplish? I know I do, and like doing this podcast today was one of my personal goals I wanted to try to accomplish.
I love that. Inserting a personal goal. One of our alums, and she was one of my first student athletes, Misha Horsey. She started a training business, and now she's training, high school athletes to go become college athletes, and she's global. She's over in Europe doing this, but she was working on personal training. And so last year, about this time, I said, Misha, I need help. I have gained 10 pounds working from home. I am so busy with work. How do I do this? And she said, we're not going to talk about weights or sit-ups or running. Let's get you into a routine of your personal goal. What's your personal goal today? And I couldn't answer it. David, she said, what is your personal goal today? I said, make lunches for the kids before school. She said, no. That's their, what is your goal? And it was like, I'm going to cry. It was like completely life-changing because I said, you know what? Yes. What am I doing for me? And so ever since I was working with Misha, she would make me do something for what is your personal goal today? And always do that first. Always do that first. Be grateful. When you wake up, what are the 3 things you're grateful for?
Right.
And before you go to bed, journal about how something positive happened today. Think about it. And I think that keeps you grounded, but I think also you can't get lost in the professional world. And selfishly, especially as a mother and a wife.
Of course.
That's all you're doing. And working from home. I mean, there could be days when I don't even leave the house. I walk the bus stop, put the kids on the bus. I'm working. They come home, the dinner and the homework and the lunches and the thing. And then you go to bed and you're like, what did Courtney do today? So I love, David, that you talk about personal goals, because I think that's very crucial to just longevity in life. But I find I'm a better wife and a better mom and a better career woman if I have a little Courtney time every day.
That's great.
Mhm.
Now, you mentioned twice that you journal. Do you still journal? Because you mentioned it at Trinidad, you mentioned
Yeah.
it a little while ago. Do you do that regularly, or do you do that weekly?
I got out of the habit in the last probably couple of months. With Misha, she held me accountable. I really, I have not done it in the last couple of months, and I need to get back to it. But I will say it's important because I think if you look back, you grow as a person. So if you find those old journals and you look back like, oh, wow, look at that hole I was in at that time. And I got myself out. But I also think, when you put pen to paper or you're typing your journal, whatever it might be, everything seems so, it's such a bigger issue in your head.
Right.
And then when you get it out, it's actually not that bad or it's not that big of a deal. So I think even just being able to get it out sometimes makes any of that stress a little bit less. I do keep one next to my bed though. And if I find myself kind of all the things, what do the kids have this week? And I have big projects to do. And when is my, I do find it very therapeutic and very beneficial for everybody involved in my life if I just write it down next to my bed and then just go back to bed.
Oh, no, I'm a big fan of it. I've been on and off personally journaling. My son's 20 since he was born and before. And it's not all the time, but it ends up being either once a month, weekly, whatever else. And I saw something recently. We were upstate and I was reading my journal that I happened to have with me. I had journaled something about when we were traveling in Africa. And I said, okay, and I did executive summary, 3 things today. Had a good meal. Josh got to see all big cats he wanted to see. And I took a hot shower. And then it was funny because I said it to my family later in the day, and my son goes, yeah, Dad, don't you remember the hot showers? We were so happy when we finally got it. I said, I couldn't remember why I wrote hot shower. And I said, I didn't read the whole detail thing because we were running somewhere. He goes, Dad, it was like solar. It was heating the hot tank. And he goes, twice we got to the camp and we didn't get hot showers. I go, oh yeah, I forgot. So it was such a good thing because it helped even us reconnect and everything else. So I think it's really impressive that you do that. So, well, Courtney, thank you so much for your time. This was interactive and exciting. I love your insights that you brought about. I think it's really going to provide value and everything else. So,
It was a pleasure.
Do you have anything else you want to share?
No, I think I'm hoping this inspires those, in their career looking to change. I took a leap. I took a huge leap of faith to leave higher education and a retirement plan and a definite basic tried and true position to take something that I'm not sure that I had any confidence doing, but I leaned on my mentors. I listened to myself. I journaled. And I jumped into, for me, what has been the most fulfilling part of my professional career. And I'm only 44. And so I can't wait to see what happens moving forward. So I'm hoping that those listening today can feel that they can take a leap, trust your gut, talk to your mentors, and you never know what'll happen.
That's great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.